This is Steve working with the Department of Children and Family, Bureau of Finance. This is cost report training. This is session number 8 of 8. In this session, we will be covering the review checklist as well as the rate calculation tab. First of all, we're going to start with the review checklist, and you see we got that tab clicked at the bottom of the cost report. Again, the file due date for this cost report is July 1st of 2013. If you get it in earlier, that would be great, but it has to be received by the end of the day on July 1st of 2013. Your agency name, as well as your service provider name, will automatically be filled in from what you completed on the cover page. With the review checklist, the provider needs to make sure that all responses in this field, in the response field, are either yes or NA. If any of the fields in those responses that are the provider's responsibility, if any of them have a red N in them, that must be resolved and must be a yes prior to the cost report being submitted to the Department of Children and Family. If any cost reports are submitted with a red N in the response, those cost reports will be returned to be corrected. So as we see, if we start here, we can see we have all yeses in the response as we work our way down, and then we do get an N for the response in this one here that I have highlighted. If we work to the left, we can see that it's the program area. It's going to be on the cover page, the cover tab. It has to do with lines 11 through 15, and also here in the file comments, it tells us that we're missing county. So if I go back to the cover page, and I look under the program provider, I can see that I forgot to enter a county. So what I would need to do is come back and correct this. Select the correct county. Go back to the review checklist, and now I can see that red N went to a yes, and I can continue on through the review checklist. So I continue down the review checklist and can see there I don't have any N's at this point, so keep going down. And here I do run into another red N. Okay, this red N, I need to look at the verification tab. It's going to relate to lines 10 through 15. What it's telling me, all the cost category amounts are not verified. And it looks like it's going to be the personnel cost. So what I can do then is go to the verification tab. And as I look in here, what I reported off my financials on the verification tab does not equal the amount that I reported for personnel cost. So what you would have to do is do the research on that and find out where that difference is coming from. In this particular case, I know the 952.20 is the difference. When I go to my personnel tab, is the difference what was automatically calculated for my Social Security amount of $10,608.20, the total. So what I can do is I can make that adjustment in here if I know that's where the adjustment occurred. Which means I could go negative 950 to 20, because that's, and I update that and it changes my total reported to 9,656. If that's what's on my financials, that's where I would go here to make that correction, since the system initially will automatically calculate your payroll taxes. So once I make that correction, I can go back to the verification tab. I can see now that my personnel costs are verified, and if I go back to the review checklist, I can see that red N is now a yes. So what you'll need to do is continue down to make sure you have no more red N's, and as we do, we come down, and then we come to this area that's completely blacked out. What that is, that's areas that are blacked out because that would be for providers that are reporting multiple programs. If you're not reporting multiple programs, on your cost report, these same cells and rows will be blacked out. As we continue down, we can see we continue to get all yeses or NAs. So that tells me when I get to the bottom here that my cost report's good to go and I should be able to submit it. I don't have any red N's on the review checklist, which is one of the first things you need to check before submitting your cost report. Below that is going to be the Department of Children and Families checklist, and this would be the checklist that we use at DCF once we receive your cost report. As you can see, some of the things we're going to check on here is, the first thing we're going to check is to make sure that everything in the review checklist for the provider is either a yes or an NA. Again, if it's a red N, as noted up here in the notes, it will be sent back to the provider for corrections. Also, we put in the date received. Different things we're going to check is we're going to verify the provider's ID number. We're going to verify the provider type. We're going to verify the Wisconsin placement days to make sure they agree with what we see on our records, and to verify as much as we can on the cost report. As you can see, as we go down, the program is going to verify a few things. Licensing will also verify some of the things, and then it'll get to audit and finance. And that's when we're going to go through and make sure everything appears to be reasonable. We're going to look at the assumptions tab. If we agree with some of the assumptions, we will add those to the cost report. Again, those assumptions should not be automatically added to your cost report. Your cost report, for the most part, should tie out to your audits. As we go down here, again, any assumptions that we approve or disapprove, we will be in contact with the provider, letting them know that. And once we have completed the complete cost report, we will make sure that a final copy of the cost report that's going to be loaded into the database is returned to the provider. Excuse me. When we send that to the provider, we'll probably give them, 2 days will be all, to either respond back if they don't agree with the changes that were made, if any were made, as well as the comments and changes that were made, that the comments and documentation is acceptable. That pretty much covers the review checklist. In this session 2, we also wanted to cover the rate calc tab. So if we go to the rate calc tab, what we are going to see here is over here on the left, everything in this area here, that is basically from the database, from the 2013 rates. So that shows you the per diem, the totals, everything that were set, the ratios, and everything that was set for 2013. And as you can see down on the bottom, that was the set rates for the 2013 ceiling rate. This is for information for providers. It allows you to compare your per diems compared to what the per diems were last year. And it kind of allows you to see where maybe you are higher than what the average calculation was last year, or where you may be lower. Again, DCF does not look at each component to see if you're high or low on that component unless you're extremely high and above the ceiling rate. If you're spending more in plant and property and less than administrative consumables, that is just fine. DCF does not compare component to component. What we're more concerned with is the total overall cost. So if you're spending more in personnel, that is fine as long as you're spending less in elsewhere. If you're spending, more in every category and your rate is well above the ceiling rate, then DCF is going to look at those different components. As we scroll down, we see the total here for this cost report that we used an example for the webinars. We can see for the ratios and everything that we entered for this example, the rate came to 196.93, the calculated rate. Again, as it's stated up here in the upper right hand corner in red, this calculation is for information purposes only. It's based on everything that the provider entered. It hasn't been reviewed by DCF. The ratios haven't been reviewed. The staffing levels haven't been reviewed. The number of hours for direct care and supervisor staff haven't been reviewed. So all that needs to be done. Again, this is kind of a benchmark. As we go down, something we have added this year is down here on the bottom. You can see another rate, which is the 175.79. That's the rate that would have been calculated by only changing the ratios that were used by DCF to set the 2013 ceiling rate. So if we scroll back up, we can see what those differences are. For the setting the 2013 rate, and this was a group home example, we used 4 and 4 during both daytime shifts and 1 to 8 at night for our ratios. In this example, we used 1 to 3, 1 to 3, and 1 to 8. So the difference being we used 1 to 3 during the 2 daytime shifts compared to what DCF used in last year's to set the 2013 ceiling rate. Those differences, because the direct care staff is such a driver of the cost for group homes, lowers that rate by over $20 per day. And again, that's because of the ratios being used to do that calculation. And we just wanted to give that as an example to providers to show how important those ratios are and how those ratios will also be reviewed to make sure they are reasonable. Again, these rates, again, are information only. That does not mean that's what your set rate is. That does not mean that's what your rate's going to be. It does not mean that should be the rate that you request on your proposal form. Again, this screen, for the most part, is information only. Another thing to remember is the cost of living adjustment calculation here is based on the percentages that were also used for 2013. We will not get the final month COLA until the middle of July. Once we have that, then we'll make the adjustments to the COLA as well. The cost of living allowance for 2014 will probably also come down. It appears that the cost of living allowance will be smaller in the 12-month period we'll be using for 2014 than what it was for what we used for 2013. And that's using the data that we have available to date. That completes the training for the review checklist as well as the rate count tab, and is also the final session of the 8 sessions that will be offered related to the cost report training sessions. Thank you very much.